You're listening to Strawberry Ink, where true crime meets justice, trauma, and the human stories often buried beneath headlines. Today's story takes us to the Wesley Chapel in Florida, a quiet movie theater, a simple manatee, and a confrontation that turned deadly over something as small as a text message. This is the case of Curtis Reeves, a military veteran, retired police captain, a husband, a grandfather, a dad, and also a man accused of murder. It was January 13th, 2014. Chad Oulson, who was at the time part of the military, and his wife, Nicole, went to catch a midday movie, Lone Survivor, at the Cobb Theater in Wesley Chapel. Just before the previews began, Chad was texting with a staff member of his young daughter's daycare, Curtis Reeves, who was 71 years old, and seated just behind this couple with his wife, became agitated. He reportedly asked Chad to stop texting as the bright light from his phone was bothering him. The two exchanged words, but the words of Chad were not pretty. Initially, he informed Curtis Reeves that he was getting a hold of his daughter. This escalated. Witnesses later recalled popcorn being thrown and then a gunshot. Chad Oulson was struck in the chest. Nicole Oulson, his wife, was injured. She got hit in the hand as she tried to shield her husband. Both were rushed to the Tampa General Hospital, but the damage was done. Only Nicole survived. Chad Oulson died just hours later. Curtis Reeves was arrested at the scene. He was initially taken to the Pasco County Sheriff's headquarters. There he was questioned. Curtis Reeves told investigators that all he did initially was tell Chad Oulson to turn his phone off. But Chad was stubborn and refused to do so. Therefore, Curtis claimed that he went to alert the theater's staff about this person being uncooperative. Therefore, the staff went over to tell Chad Oulson to turn off his phone. This really turned him on. Chad Oulson turned back at Curtis Reeves and started insulting him, even blurting out F-bombs at him. And in particular shouting, "Who do you think you are?" Then Chad started throwing popcorn at Curtis Reeves. The popcorn made his glasses tilt, therefore, Curtis's vision was edgy. He was seeing blurry, according to him. And then, according to Curtis, Chad Oulson was about to strike him, so what Curtis did was pull out a handgun he was carrying and shoot him. Due to his law enforcement training, he claimed that he normally carried handguns, and also because he was an elderly person walking with a cane. Curtis Reeves claimed that he acted in self-defense. Afterwards, he was booked into the Pasco County Jail on 2 felonies, second-degree murder and aggravated battery. At his first court appearance the following day, Judge Pat Siracusa made a decisive ruling. Curtis Reeves would be held in jail without bond to await trial. Meanwhile, the family of Chad Oulson prepared for his funeral. Nicole, as she was released within days from that hospital, was able to attend the service. There was a memorial service on Saturday, February 1st, in the Glory Worship Center in Clayton, Illinois. And before that, there was a private service held on January 18th in Land O'Lakes, Florida. which is basically a census designated place, or as I like to call, a community with parks, activities, etc. These services were conducted by the Loyalist Funeral Home of Land Lakes, Florida. Chad Oulson was cremated. When arraignment came, Curtis Reeves pleaded not guilty to the charges. Judge Siracusa continued to keep him in jail, but months later, things changed. Curtis was lawyered up. He had hired private attorney Richard Escobar to represent him in the legal matters to come. In July of 2014, the Tampa Appeals Court granted Curtis Reeves a $150,000 bond. Therefore, he was released from jail under strict house arrest conditions and was required to wear an ankle monitor at all times. He was only permitted to leave home for court appearances and eventually his granddaughter's wedding during jury deliberations. This wedding was held at the court. Years passed, legal motions, delays, and debates over Florida's stand your ground law, granting residents or tourists the permission to gun someone down when feeling endangered. Chad's wife, Nicole Oulson, a grieving widow and survivor of the shooting, filed a civil lawsuit against Curtis Reeves. Her attorney, T.J. Grimaldi, negotiated the case outside of court. Curtis's legal team, led by Richard Escobar, settled the matter privately. The terms were never disclosed and a payment was made to cover damages. It was not until February of 2022 that Reeves finally stood trial for his criminal case. Judge Susan Barfel presided over the courtroom. Reeves was represented, this time by attorney Dino Michaels, while Scott Rosenweiser led the prosecution. A jury of 6 members plus 4 alternates was tasked in deciding, was this self-defense or murder? This was about 8 years after the shooting. The process took way too long. 8 years must have been a super long time, and it must have been super hard to be on house arrest for that long. Also, the witnesses could have died. On February 25th, 2022, after nearly 8 years of this legal limbo, the jury finally delivered its verdict. Not guilty on all charges. Curtis Reeves was free, not from prison, but from house arrest too. He could finally go out on weekends and did not have to be locked inside his house all day. A text message, a bucket of popcorn, a gun, a life lost, a family shattered, and a courtroom saga that stretched for nearly a decade. Curtis Reeves, the retired police captain, had a case that forced a nation to ask difficult questions about conflict, fear, and the thin line between self-defense and overreaction. You're listening to Strawberry Ink. I'm Santiago, and we'll see you next time with another story where crime, consequence, and complexity collide. Thank you for listening and have a good rest of your day.